A man gave a ride to a disabled woman stuck in the rain. The next day, a helicopter appeared over his house. Aiden Peak, in his early 50s, had worked hard all his life. He lived in a quiet, small town far from the city. After losing his wife, Amy, to cancer, life became a dull routine of work and sleep. Aiden worked as a delivery driver during the day and took extra jobs in the evening to make ends meet. His life was simple but lacked the joy he once had when Amy was with him. One cold and rainy evening, after a long shift, Aiden was driving home. The rain was so heavy that it was hard to see, even with the wipers on. The roads were empty, and Aiden was eager to get home for dinner and rest. But as he drove along a quiet road, he noticed a figure struggling in the rain. Squinting, he saw a woman trying to push a wheelchair. He slowed down, concerned for the stranger braving the storm. As he pulled over, he realized the woman was soaked to the bone, shivering from the cold. Her wheelchair was stuck in the muddy shoulder of the road, and it was clear she wasn't going to get anywhere without help. Aiden rolled his window down and called out, "Hey, do you need a hand?" The woman looked up, clearly startled by his presence but relieved. "I would really appreciate it. My wheelchair's stuck, and my car broke down a few miles back. I was trying to make it to the nearest gas station, but, well, you can see how that's going." Aiden quickly parked his car and rushed over to her side. Together, they managed to free the wheelchair from the mud. Aiden could see how difficult it must have been for her to be out here alone, in the middle of nowhere. She looked exhausted and vulnerable, but there was a quiet strength in her. "Thank you so much," the woman said, her voice soft but full of gratitude. "I'm Rebecca, by the way." Aiden replied, "Let me give you a lift. You can't stay out here in this weather." Rebecca hesitated for a moment but then nodded. She had no other option, and Aiden seemed trustworthy enough. With some effort, they managed to load her wheelchair into the back of his truck, and soon Rebecca was sitting in the passenger seat, trying to dry herself off with a blanket Aiden had in the back seat. "Where are you headed?" Aiden asked as they drove, the sound of rain pounding on the roof of the truck. "I was on my way home, but I guess I'm not going to make it there tonight," Rebecca replied. "I live about 50 miles from here, but I'll be fine if you can just drop me off at the nearest motel." Aiden glanced at her. She looked utterly drained, and he could see she wasn't just talking about the day's events. There was a deeper exhaustion in her eyes, something he recognized all too well from his own grief. "I can do better than that," Aiden said. "Why have you come back to my place for the night? I've got a guest room, and we can figure out what to do in the morning. Besides, it's still pouring out there, and I'd hate to leave you stranded in a motel." Rebecca looked at him, unsure of what to say. She hadn't expected kindness from a stranger, but there was something genuine about Aiden's offer. After a moment of contemplation, she nodded. "That's very kind of you. Thank you." They drove in comfortable silence, the storm outside raging on as they made their way to Aiden's house. When they arrived, Aiden helped Rebecca into the warm, cozy living room, gave her some dry clothes to change into, and made a pot of tea. Over tea, they talked. Rebecca opened up about her struggles. She was a former professor, forced to retire early due to a degenerative disease that had put her in a wheelchair. She had been fiercely independent her whole life, but was finding it harder and harder to maintain that independence. Her car breaking down had been the last straw in what had already been a difficult month. Aiden shared his story too, about losing Amy and how he was still trying to figure out how to live without her. They talked late into the night, and for the first time in a long while, Aiden felt a connection with someone. It wasn't just about helping a stranger anymore. It was about two people finding solace in each other's company. The next morning, Aiden was awoken by the sound of the helicopter. His first groggy thought was that it was the local hospital's medical helicopter, but the noise was far too close. Confused, he got out of bed and walked outside in his pajamas. His jaw dropped when he saw a large helicopter hovering over his house, with a group of men in suits standing by a sleek black car in his driveway. Before he could process what was happening, one of the men approached him. "Mr. Peak?" the man asked, his tone professional but friendly. Aiden, still stunned, nodded. "Yes, that's me. Is everything okay?" The man smiled. "I'm here on behalf of Miss Rebecca Howe. She'd like to thank you personally for your kindness last night." Aiden blinked, completely baffled. "Rebecca? Is she okay?" "She's more than okay," the man replied. "Miss Howe, in fact, is the CEO of Howe Global Industries. You may not have realized it, but you gave a lift to one of the wealthiest and most influential women in the country." Aiden's heart skipped a beat. Rebecca, the same woman he had helped last night, who had spoken about her struggles and hardships, was a billionaire. He couldn't believe it. "Miss Howe would like to invite you for a ride," the man continued, gesturing toward the helicopter. "She has something she'd like to discuss with you." Still in shock, Aiden nodded and quickly changed into something more presentable. Before he knew it, he was climbing into the helicopter, where Rebecca sat waiting, looking more composed than the bedraggled woman he'd met in the rain. "Aiden," she greeted him with a warm smile. "I wanted to thank you again for last night. You have no idea how much it meant to me." Aiden shook his head, still trying to wrap his mind around everything. "Rebecca, or should I say Miss Howe, I had no idea." She waved off his words. "Pleased," Just call me Rebecca. Titles and money don't matter. What matters is that you were kind to me when you had no reason to be. You didn't know who I was, and yet you still helped me." Aiden smiled sheepishly. "Well, I just couldn't leave you out there in the rain. And that's exactly why I'm here," Rebecca said. "I want to offer you something in return. You told me last night that you've been working 2 jobs just to get by, and that you had dreams of opening a clothing store one day. I want to help you make that dream a reality." Aiden's heart raced. "What do you mean?" Rebecca reached into a briefcase and pulled out a document. "This is a business proposal. I'd like to invest in your dream, Aiden. I'll provide the funding and resources to get your store off the ground, and in return, you'll run it as your own. You'll have full creative control. Consider it a thank you for your kindness." Aiden stared at the papers in disbelief. This couldn't be happening. I don't know what to say." Rebecca smiled. "Just say yes, Aiden. You deserve this." Tears welled up in Aiden's eyes. He'd spent so many years struggling, feeling like life had passed him by after losing Amy. Now, because of one simple act of kindness, his entire future was changing before his eyes. "Yes," he said finally, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, Rebecca. I don't know how I'll ever repay you." "You already have," she replied softly, "by reminding me that there are still good people in the world." In the months that followed, with Rebecca's support, Aiden opened his clothing store. It wasn't the biggest, but it quickly became a beloved community staple. Rebecca kept her promise to check in, and their friendship deepened over the years, all thanks to that fateful rainy night when Aiden gave her a lift. His simple act of kindness transformed his life in unimaginable ways, proving that even the smallest gestures can lead to great rewards. This story reminds us that true kindness can change lives, regardless of wealth or status. Aiden's compassionate act touched Rebecca's heart and opened doors he never expected. It prompts us to ask, how often do we help others without expecting anything in return? Now, we'd love to hear from you. What small act of kindness made a big difference in your life or someone else's?